The story starts from this man, a war photographer who's seen death through a lens more times than most people see sunrise. His name is Ethan Cole, and he's about to discover that some cameras don't just capture light. They capture time itself. Welcome to the real conflict zone. The rain hammered against the windshield like bullets on metal. Ethan Cole sat in his truck at a red light somewhere between nowhere and nothing, his hands gripping the steering wheel with the kind of tension that comes from too many sleepless nights. The city sprawled around him. Gray buildings, gray sky, gray people walking with their heads down against the weather. Everything was gray these days, even his memories. He'd been home for 3 months now. 3 months since Aleppo. 3 months since the explosion that took his partner Marcus and left Ethan with nothing but survivor's guilt and a collection of photographs that won awards but haunted his dreams. The therapy sessions weren't working. The medication made him feel like he was drowning. And the assignments his editor kept sending him felt like insults, birthday parties, corporate events, fashion shows. He was a war photographer. He documented conflict. He showed the world what it didn't want to see. And now they wanted him to photograph models in expensive clothes pretending to care about things that didn't matter. The light turned green. Ethan didn't move. Behind him, someone honked. Then another. He lifted his foot off the brake and let the truck roll forward. His mind somewhere else entirely. Somewhere darker. Somewhere that smelled like smoke and copper and fear. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Another message from Sarah, his ex-wife. Another attempt to check in on him. Another reminder that he'd pushed away everyone who'd ever tried to help. He ignored it. He'd been ignoring a lot of things lately. The antique store appeared on his right like an apparition. He'd driven this route 100 times and never noticed it before. Maybe it was new. Maybe he'd just never been paying attention. The sign above the door read, Holloway's Curiosities in faded gold letters, and the windows were crowded with the kind of junk that accumulates in the corners of forgotten lives. Old typewriters, vintage radios, leather suitcases covered in travel stickers from countries that didn't exist anymore. Ethan pulled over without thinking. He didn't need anything from an antique store. He didn't need anything at all. But something about the place pulled at him. Maybe it was the boredom. Maybe it was the need to be anywhere other than inside his own head. Or maybe it was something else. Something he couldn't name yet but would understand soon enough. The bell above the door chimed when he entered. The smell hit him immediately. Old paper, dust, wood polish, and something else. Something chemical and sharp that reminded him of darkrooms and developing fluid. The store was larger inside than it looked from the street, stretching back into shadows that the overhead lights couldn't quite penetrate. Shelves lined every wall, packed with objects that seemed to whisper their histories. A stuffed crow watched him from atop a cabinet. A collection of porcelain dolls stared with glass eyes that caught the light wrong. Help you with something? The voice came from behind a counter in the back. Ethan walked toward it, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. The man behind the counter was ancient, or at least looked it. His face was a road map of wrinkles, his hair white and wild like Einstein's, his eyes sharp and bright despite his age. He wore a vest over a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he was polishing what looked like a brass sextant. Just browsing, Ethan said. His voice sounded rough even to his own ears. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken to someone in person. Browsers welcome, the old man said. But you don't look like a browser. You look like a finder. A finder. Someone looking for something specific, even if they don't know what it is yet. The old man set down the sextant and studied Ethan with unsettling intensity. You're a photographer. It wasn't a question. Ethan's hand went automatically to his neck where his camera usually hung. But he'd left it in the truck. He'd been leaving it there a lot lately. How'd you know? The way you look at things. Like you're framing shots even standing still. Like you're trying to capture something that keeps slipping away. The old man smiled, revealing teeth too white to be real. I've got something you might be interested in. Just came in yesterday. Estate sale. Belonged to a journalist who disappeared on assignment. Name was Thomas Crow. You might have heard of him. Ethan had. Thomas Crow had been a legend in photojournalism circles. He'd covered every major conflict from Vietnam to Syria, producing images that define generations. He'd won 3 Pulitzers and turned down a 4th because he said, awards were for people who needed validation. Then he'd vanished in Kiev 2 years ago while covering the early days of the war. No body. No explanation. Just gone. His camera? Ethan asked, and he could hear the hunger in his own voice. One of them, a Canon 5D Mark IV, barely used from the looks of it, still has his strap on it. The old man disappeared into a back room and returned carrying a camera bag. He set it on the counter with reverence. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he opened the bag. The camera inside was beautiful, black body, professional grade, the kind of equipment that cost more than most people's cars. He lifted it out carefully. The weight felt right in his hands. Perfect balance. The strap was worn leather with TC embossed near the buckle. Thomas Crow's initials. How much? Ethan asked, even though he knew he was going to buy it regardless of price. $300. It was absurdly cheap. A camera like this should cost thousands. Ethan looked up sharply. What's wrong with it? Nothing. Far as I know. Just need to move inventory. Estate sales don't pay much. Figured I'd pass the savings along. The old man's smile widened slightly. Consider it karma, or fate, or whatever you want to call it when the right object finds the right person at the right time. Ethan pulled out his wallet before his rational mind could talk him out of it. He counted out $300 in cash, most of what he had until his next disability check came through, and handed it over. The old man took it without counting, his fingers brushing Ethan's palm for just a moment. They were cold, unnaturally cold. One piece of advice, the old man said as Ethan packed the camera back into its bag. Pay attention to what you photograph. And more importantly, pay attention to when. When? But the old man had already turned away, back to polishing his sextant, and Ethan got the distinct impression that the conversation was over. He left the store with the camera bag over his shoulder, the bell chiming behind him like a warning he didn't know how to interpret. The rain had stopped. The sky was still gray but lighter now, threatening to break into something resembling sunshine. Ethan climbed into his truck and sat there for a moment, the camera bag on his lap. He should have felt excited. This was Thomas Crow's camera. Piece of history. A connection to the kind of photographer he used to want to be, but instead he felt uneasy. Something about the transaction felt off. The price. The timing. The old man's cold fingers and cryptic warning. Pay attention to when. What the hell did that mean? Ethan started the truck and drove home. Home was a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned a decade ago. The elevator was broken, it was always broken, so he took the stairs, his knee aching with each step. Shrapnel from the Aleppo explosion. The doctor said he was lucky it wasn't worse. Ethan didn't feel lucky. Inside, the apartment was exactly as he'd left it, which is to say, a mess. Newspapers piled on the coffee table. Empty takeout containers stacked by the sink. His other camera equipment scattered across every surface. Photos pinned to the walls in no particular order. Vatsonis. Refugees. Children with haunted eyes. Marcus grinning at him from behind his own camera in what turned out to be the last photo Ethan had taken of him. He set the camera bag on his desk and pulled out Thomas Crow's Canon. In the light from his window, it looked even more pristine. He checked the settings. Everything was default. He popped out the memory card, empty. He examined every inch of the body, looking for damage or wear. Nothing. It was as if the camera had never been used. But that couldn't be right. Thomas Crow had been a working photographer. His cameras would have been used hard and often. So why did this one look brand new? Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. Another one he'd ignore. He set the phone face down and turned back to the camera. There was only one way to test it properly. He walked to his window and aimed at the street below. A woman was walking a dog. Car was parallel parking badly. A kid on a bike weaved between pedestrians. Ordinary life. The kind of thing Ethan used to find boring. He pressed the shutter. The click and whir of the mechanism sounded perfect. He took a few more shots, the buildings across the street, the gray sky, his own reflection in the window glass. Then he connected the camera to his laptop and uploaded the images. The first photo appeared on screen. The woman with the dog. Except something was wrong. The angle was right. The composition was right. But the details were off. The woman was wearing a blue coat in real life. In the photo, her coat was red. The dog was a golden retriever outside his window. In the photo, it was a terrier. And the car that had been parking was now driving away. Ethan frowned. He pulled up the second image. The buildings across the street. But they looked different too. One had scaffolding in the photo that wasn't there now. Another had lights on in windows that were currently dark. The third image, his reflection, showed him holding the camera up to his face. But his shirt was different. He was wearing a gray t-shirt now. In the photo, he wore a black one. His heart started to beat faster. This didn't make sense. He checked the camera settings again. Nothing unusual. He examined the lens. Clean. No distortion. He uploaded the images to his editing software and zoomed in, looking for signs of digital manipulation. Nothing. The images were clean, untouched, real. But they weren't showing reality. At least not the reality he'd photographed. Ethan stood and walked to his closet. He pulled out the black t-shirt from his laundry hamper. It was still damp. He'd been wearing it this morning when he spilled coffee on himself and changed into the gray one. This morning. About 10 minutes before he'd left for his drive. 10 minutes. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He ran back to his laptop and checked the timestamps on the photos. They matched the time he'd taken them. But what they showed was from earlier. 10 minutes earlier. He grabbed the camera and ran to the window again. The woman with the dog was gone now. The car had finished parking. A different kid was riding a different bike. He took another photo and uploaded it immediately. The image showed the woman with the dog. The car mid-park. The first kid on the bike. Exactly what he'd seen 10 minutes ago. No, isen whispered. That's not possible. But the evidence was right there on his screen. The camera wasn't showing the present. It was showing the past. 10 minutes in the past. He spent the next 2 hours testing it obsessively. He took photos of his clock, of the street, of himself doing different things. Every single image showed the world as it had been exactly 10 minutes before the shutter clicked. He moved objects around his apartment and photographed them. They appeared in their previous positions. He wrote notes and photographed them. They were blank. He even called his own phone from a burner and photographed it not ringing. The image showed it ringing from 10 minutes before. It was impossible. It violated every law of physics and logic. Cameras captured light. Light traveled at a constant speed. There was no mechanism by which a camera could capture photons from the past. And yet this one did. By the time darkness fell outside his window, Ethan had filled 2 memory cards with test shots. His desk was covered in printouts, each one showing a reality that had already happened. He sat back in his chair and stared at Thomas Crow's camera like it was a bomb that might explode. Why? How? And what had happened to Thomas Crow? The old man's words came back to him. Pay attention to when. He'd known. Somehow, that ancient man in the antique store had known what this camera did. And he'd sold it to Ethan anyway, for $300. A camera that could photograph the past. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. The applications were endless. Crime scene investigation.
Accident reconstruction.
Historical documentation. He could photograph locations and see what had happened there 10 minutes before. He could solve mysteries, prevent disasters, change everything. Or he could go crazy trying to understand something that shouldn't exist. He looked at the last photo he'd taken, a shot of his desk from 10 minutes ago. And that's when he saw it. In the background, reflected in the black screen of his television, was a figure. Someone standing in the corner of his apartment. Someone who wasn't there now. Someone who hadn't been there 10 minutes ago either because Ethan had been alone. The figure was blurry, indistinct, like it was out of focus even though everything else in the image was sharp. But he could make out the shape of a person. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a long coat or cloak. And where its face should be was just darkness. Ethan's mouth went dry. He zoomed in on the figure, enhancing the image as much as his software would allow. The darkness where its face should be wasn't shadow. It was absence. A void in the shape of a head. And as he stared at it, he could have sworn the void stared back. He spun around in his chair. His apartment was empty. The corner where the figure had been reflected was just wall and shadow. But his skin was crawling, every instinct screaming that he was being watched. He grabbed the camera and took another photo of his desk. Uploaded it. Waited. The image appeared. The figure was still there in the reflection. But closer now. Standing right behind where Ethan had been sitting 10 minutes ago when he took the previous photo. Close enough that if he'd turned around, he would have seen it. But he'd been alone. He knew he'd been alone. Ethan's hands shook as he took another photo. And another. And another. Each one showed the figure moving closer in the television's reflection. Approaching him across time intervals of 10 minutes. In the most recent image, it was standing directly behind his chair. If this pattern continued, in 10 more minutes it would be. He didn't finish the thought. He grabbed his keys and his wallet and ran out of his apartment, the camera forgotten on his desk. He took the stairs 2 at a time and burst out into the night. The cold air hit his face like a slap. He stood on the sidewalk, breathing hard, looking up at his dark window 3 floors above. What the hell was happening? Cameras didn't photograph the past. Figures didn't appear in reflections that hadn't been there in reality. None of this was possible. He was losing his mind. The stress and trauma and guilt were finally breaking him. He needed to go back to his therapist. He needed to increase his medication. He needed to accept that he was having some kind of psychotic break. But he knew he wasn't. The photos were real. The camera was real. And whatever that figure was, it was real too. Ethan walked. He didn't have a destination in mind. He just moved, putting distance between himself and his apartment. The streets were mostly empty at this hour. A few bars were still open, spilling music and light onto the sidewalk. A homeless man slept in a doorway, covered in newspapers. A taxi drove past without stopping. He found himself at an all-night diner and went inside. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness outside. He took a booth in the back and ordered coffee he didn't want. The waitress was young and tired and didn't make conversation, which suited him fine. He sat there for an hour, 2 hours, watching the clock on the wall tick through minutes that felt like hours. At some point, he pulled out his phone. Sarah had sent 3 more messages. Then she'd stopped. He opened the last one. "I know you don't want to talk, but I'm worried about you. Please just let me know you're okay." He typed a response. "I'm okay. Sorry I've been distant. Processing some things." It was a lie. He wasn't okay. And the things he was processing were impossible. His phone buzzed immediately. Sarah was awake. "Can I call you?" "Not tonight. Soon though. I promise." Another lie. He deleted the conversation and pocketed the phone. Through the diner window, he could see his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Just him. No figures in the background. No voids where faces should be. But when he got home, if he went home, would the figure be waiting? Had it continued moving forward through time? Was it in his apartment right now, standing in the physical space where it had only existed in reflections before? Ethan paid for his coffee and left. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. He'd survived the night. But as he walked back toward his apartment building, he knew he couldn't avoid this forever. The camera was still there. The figure was still there, or had been, or would be. The tenses got confusing when dealing with time that didn't flow right. He had to know the truth. Even if it destroyed him, he had to know. The stairs to his apartment felt like climbing a mountain. Each step was an effort. His knees screamed in protest. By the time he reached his door, he was sweating despite the cold. He stood there for a long moment, key in hand, listening. Nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels like holding your breath. He unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly. The apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Messy. Dark. Empty. He flipped on the lights. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. He was alone. The camera sat on his desk where he'd left it. He approached it like it might bite. Next to it was his laptop, still open, still showing the last photo he'd taken. The figure standing directly behind his chair in the reflection. Ethan checked the time. It had been over an hour since he'd taken that photo, which meant the 10-minute window had passed multiple times. Which meant whatever the figure was supposed to be doing right now, it had already done it or was doing it or would do it in a way that made his head hurt to contemplate. He sat down at his desk, not in his chair where the figure had been standing, but in a different one from his kitchen table that he dragged over. He connected the camera to his laptop and reviewed all the photos he'd taken, laying them out in sequence. The progression was clear. The figure appeared first at a distance, then closer still, moving forward through space captured in 10-minute increments of the past. But what was it? And why was it only visible in reflections? And most importantly, why had it appeared at all? Ethan thought about Thomas Crow, a legendary photographer who'd disappeared without explanation. Had he seen this figure too? Had he photographed the past and found something waiting there? Had that something followed him into the present and taken him? A new thought occurred to him. If the camera showed 10 minutes in the past, and the figure was moving forward through that past, then maybe he could see where it came from. He scrolled back through the images, looking at the earliest ones he'd taken yesterday afternoon. The first few showed nothing unusual, just his apartment as it had been. But then, in one of the images, a shot of his window, there was something in the glass. Not the figure yet, just a blur, a distortion, like looking at something through water. He enhanced the image. The distortion was in the shape of a door, or a doorway, an opening into somewhere that wasn't his apartment. And through that opening, he could just barely make out the figure standing in darkness on the other side. It had come through, stepped from wherever it existed into his world, or at least into the 10-minute-old past that the camera captured. And now it was moving forward in time toward the present. Toward him. Ethan's stomach turned over. This wasn't just a haunted camera. This was a door. A way for something to cross from one place to another. And he'd opened it by taking photos. He had to close it. But how? He couldn't untake the photos. He couldn't send the figure back. Unless he used the camera the way it was meant to be used. Not to photograph the present and see the past, but to photograph the past and see further into it. To trace the figure backward to its source and find a way to seal the door before it finished crossing through. It was insane. But so was everything else that had happened in the last 24 hours. Ethan grabbed the camera and went to his window. He took a photo of his reflection. Uploaded it immediately. The image showed him standing there 10 minutes ago, which meant it showed him standing there now, photographing himself, which made his head hurt, but he pushed through it. And in the reflection behind him, the figure was there. Closer. So close that if he turned around, he would see it with his naked eyes. But he didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the screen and took another photo. And another, building a sequence. Each one showing the figure closer in the 10-minute increments. He worked frantically, his fingers flying across the camera buttons. Photo. Upolat. Photo. Upolat. The figure advancing frame by frame by frame, until finally, in one of the images, it was right there, standing directly in front of him, so close that he should have been able to feel its breath if it breathed, the void where its face should be filling the frame. And then, in the next photo, something changed. The figure wasn't looking at him anymore. It was looking at the camera, at Thomas Crow's camera, and its featureless head was tilted slightly, like it was curious or confused or both. Ethan's hands froze on the keyboard. The figure knew about the camera. Had always known. It hadn't been following him. It had been following the camera. Coming through the images Thomas Crow had taken. Tracking the device that could see it across the boundary between what was and what had been. And now it was here. In his apartment. In his time. No longer just a reflection in photos of the past, but a physical presence in the present. Ethan turned around slowly. The apartment was empty, but he could feel it. A weight in the air, a pressure against his skin. The sensation of being watched by something that didn't have eyes. What do you want? His voice sounded small and broken in the silence. Nothing answered, but the lights flickered. Once, twice, and his laptop screen went dark even though it was still plugged in. The camera in his hands suddenly felt heavy. Too heavy. Like it was full of something more than electronics and glass. He set it down carefully on his desk. When he pulled his hands away, his fingers were cold. The same unnatural cold he'd felt when the old man at the antique store had taken his money. The old man. Holloway's Curiosities. He knew. He'd said the camera belonged to a journalist who disappeared. He'd sold it for almost nothing. He'd warned Ethan to pay attention to when. He'd known exactly what he was doing. Ethan grabbed his keys and his jacket and ran out of his apartment again. This time with purpose. This time with destination. He had to get back to that store. He had to demand answers. He had to fix whatever he'd broken by buying that camera and bringing it home and photographing the past until the past photographed him back. The streets were busier now. Morning traffic. People going to work. The world continuing as if reality hadn't fractured. Ethan drove too fast, running red lights, his mind racing faster than his truck. The antique store. It had been on this street. Right here where he'd pulled over on impulse. He was sure of it. But when he got there, the space was empty. Not closed, empty. A vacant storefront with soap. Scrawled windows and a for lease sign hanging crooked on the door. The kind of place that had been abandoned for months or years. Ethan parked and got out. He pressed his face against the glass, cupping his hands around his eyes to block the glare. Inside was nothing. Bare walls. Bare floors. No shelves. No counter. No stuffed crow or porcelain dolls or brass sextant. No evidence that Holloway's Curiosities had ever existed. But it had. He'd been there. He'd spoken to the old man. He'd bought the camera. He had the camera. It was real. Unless the store had been there 10 minutes before he'd seen it. Unless he'd walked into a place that existed only in the past and bought an object from a man who existed only in memory and brought it forward into the present where it didn't belong. Ethan's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the curb, his head in his hands. This was impossible. All of it. But it was happening anyway. Time wasn't working right. The past wasn't staying in the past. And something was using Thomas Crow's camera as a bridge to cross from one side to the other. He pulled out his phone and did something he should have done yesterday. He searched for Thomas Crow. Articles. Obituaries. Tributes from colleagues. The official story was that he'd disappeared in Kiev while covering the war. Last seen entering a building that had been hit by artillery the next day. Body never recovered. Presumed dead. But Ethan kept digging. He found a forum for photojournalists where people who'd known Crow shared stories. And buried in a thread from 6 months ago was a comment from someone claiming to be Crow's assistant. She said he'd bought a camera from a strange antique store in Warsaw 2 days before he disappeared. Said the camera was doing weird things. Showing images that didn't match reality. Crow had been obsessed with it. Had taken thousands of photos. And then he'd vanished. The assistant said she tried to find the store again but couldn't. Said it was like it had never been there. She said Crow's last words to her were, "Pay attention to when." Ethan's blood went cold. The same words. The exact same words the old man had said to him. He scrolled further and found more stories. A photographer in Berlin had bought a camera from an antique store and disappeared. Another in Tokyo. Another in Cairo. Always the same pattern. Strange store. Old man selling. Camera that showed the past. And then nothing. The photographers vanished as completely as Thomas Crow. How many? Ethan wondered. How many had bought that camera or cameras like it? How many had photographed the past and found something waiting there? And why did the camera keep appearing? Why did the old man keep selling it? Because he wasn't human. That much was obvious now. The cold hands. The knowing smile. The store that existed and didn't exist. He was something else. Something that used the camera to trap people. To pull them out of time and into whatever void the figure came from. And Ethan had taken the bait like all the others. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it. The message was a single photo. A shot of his apartment building taken from the street. Taken right now based on the angle of the morning light. But there was something wrong with the image. His window, the one to his third-floor apartment, was dark. And in that darkness, pressed against the glass, was the figure, looking down at the street, at where Ethan had been standing earlier, waiting for him to come back. Ethan dropped his phone like it was burning him. How had the figure sent him a photo? How did it have his number? How was any of this happening? His phone buzzed again. Another photo. This one was of him, sitting on the curb right now in front of the empty storefront, taken from across the street. But when he looked up, there was no one there. Just morning traffic and people walking past without seeing him. Another buzz. Another photo. This one showed him 10 minutes from now according to the timestamp. He was standing, turning around, looking at something behind him with an expression of horror on his face. But that was impossible. The camera showed the past, not the future. Unless it had changed. Unless whatever rules governed it had shifted. Unless the figure had learned how to use it in ways Ethan didn't understand. He stood and turned around. The street was normal. Cars, people, buildings, nothing out of place. But his reflection in the storefront window showed something different. Showed the street empty. Showed the morning dark. And showed the figure standing right behind him, so close that they were almost touching. Ethan ran. He didn't know where he was going. Just away. Away from the reflection and the impossible photos and the apartment he couldn't go back to. He ran until his knee gave out and he collapsed in an alley between two buildings, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might explode. He couldn't run forever. The figure would find him. It was connected to him now through the camera and the photos and the act of looking at what shouldn't be looked at. Time was broken, and he'd broken it by buying a camera that never should have been sold. Think, he told himself. Think like a photographer. Cameras need light to work. They need a lens and a sensor and a moment in time to capture. The camera was showing the past by capturing light from 10 minutes ago. But light didn't work that way. Light didn't wait around. So there had to be something else. Some other mechanism. Some rule he could exploit. The photos of the future. Those were new. The figure had sent those. Which meant it had learned how to use the camera. Which meant the camera could be used. Not just to observe but to manipulate. To change. What if he could photograph the figure in the past and prevent it from ever crossing through? What if he could take a photo of the moment it first appeared and somehow close that doorway? But he didn't have the camera. It was back in his apartment. With the figure. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened the text messages. The photos the figure had sent were still there. He examined them closely. The shot of his apartment building. The shot of him on the curb. The shot of him 10 minutes in the future. What was he missing? What detail had he overlooked? And then he saw it. In the first photo, the one of his building, there was something in the corner of the frame. A storefront. Holloway's Curiosities. The sign was there, faded gold letters, exactly as he remembered. The store wasn't gone. It was displaced. Existing in a different when than the rest of the world. If he could get back there, back to the moment the store existed, he could confront the old man. Get answers. Find a way to undo this. But how did you get to a when that wasn't now? The camera. He needed Thomas Crow's camera. He needed to photograph the past and step into it somehow. Use the same mechanism that the figure was using but in reverse. Which meant going back to his apartment, where the figure was waiting. Ethan stood on shaking legs. Every instinct screamed at him to keep running. But running wouldn't solve anything. The figure would follow. It was connected to him now. He had to face it. Had to find a way to send it back. He walked back to his building. Each step felt like walking to his own execution. The morning sun was fully up now, bright and warm and completely at odds with the cold dread in his chest. He climbed the stairs slowly. His knee screamed. His hands trembled. By the time he reached his door, he was drenched in sweat. The door was open. He'd locked it when he left. He was certain he'd locked it. But now it stood ajar, darkness spilling out into the hallway like liquid. Ethan pushed it open the rest of the way. His apartment looked wrong. The light from the window was gray and dim even though it was morning. The air was thick and hard to breathe. And everything was in the wrong place. Not moved wrong. like he was looking at his apartment through a distorted lens. The camera sat on his desk exactly where he'd left it. Next to it, his laptop was on. The screen showed a photo he didn't remember taking. It was a shot of the antique store interior. Shelves lined with objects. The stuffed crow, the porcelain dolls. And behind the counter, the old man, looking directly at the camera, smiling that too wide smile. Ethan approached the desk carefully. He reached for the camera. His fingers closed around it. It was warm, unnaturally warm, like it had been in someone's hands recently. Someone or something. He lifted it and looked through the viewfinder. The world through the lens looked different, clearer, more real than reality. He could see details his naked eyes missed. The way dust motes moved through the air, the texture of the wall, the shadow in the corner that was darker than it should be. He swung the camera toward the shadow. Through the viewfinder, he could see it clearly. The figure, standing in his apartment, watching him with its absence of a face. It was tall, taller than he'd realized from the reflections. And thin, too thin, like it wasn't quite solid. Like it was a tear in the fabric of space shaped like a person. Ethan's finger found the shutter button. He pressed it. The camera clicked. The flash went off even though he hadn't set it to. Brilliant white light flooded the apartment, searing away the shadows. When his vision cleared, the figure was gone. The apartment was normal again. Morning light streaming through the window, air easy to breathe, everything in its proper place. But the camera in his hands was vibrating. Not mechanically, there was no motor running. It was vibrating like something alive and angry. He set it down quickly. The laptop screen had changed. Now it showed a photo of his apartment. Empty. Normal. But the timestamp was wrong. It showed a date from 2 years ago, around the time Thomas Crow had disappeared. And in the corner of that photo, barely visible in the reflection on his television screen, was a different figure. Smaller than the one he'd seen. More distinct. Wearing a photographer's vest and carrying camera equipment. Thomas Crow. Ethan's breath caught. Crow was there in his apartment 2 years ago. But that was impossible. Ethan had only moved here 6 months ago. Unless when didn't matter to the camera anymore. Unless it was showing him all of time. Past, present, future. All colliding in the photographs like layers of reality bleeding into each other. He looked at the image of Thomas Crow more closely. The legendary photographer was standing in what would become Ethan's apartment, holding the same camera Ethan now possessed. And he was photographing something. Ethan zoomed in on Crow's viewfinder, trying to see what he'd been capturing. The image was too pixelated, too distant, but he could make out shapes. A doorway. The same doorway he'd seen in his earlier photos. The doorway the figure had come through. Thomas Crow had found it first. Had opened it first. And whatever came through had taken him. Now it was coming for Ethan. His phone rang, shattering the silence. He jumped, nearly dropping it. The caller ID showed Sarah's name, his ex-wife. He answered without thinking, desperate for a connection to something normal and real. Ethan? Her voice was worried, strained. Are you okay? I've been trying to reach you all morning. Sarah. His voice cracked. I don't know what I am. You sound terrible. What's happening? Are you using again?
No.
Nothing like that. How could he explain? I bought a camera. It's doing impossible things. Showing me the past. Showing me things that aren't there. There's something coming for me and I don't know how to stop it. Silence on the other end. He could hear her breathing, could imagine her face. The concern. The fear that he'd finally lost his grip completely. Ethan, listen to me. I need you to put down whatever you're holding and step away from it. Can you do that? You don't understand. This is real. The camera is real. The figure is real. What figure? The thing that's been following me through the photos. Came through when I started taking pictures. It's here now. In my apartment. I can feel it. Ethan. Her voice was firmer now. The tone she used when she was trying to stay calm in a crisis. I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there. Promise me. You can't come here. It's not safe. I'm already in my car. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Just hold on. Okay? She hung up before he could protest. Ethan stared at his phone, then at the camera, then at the laptop screen showing Thomas Crow in his apartment 2 years before he'd even lived here. Time was broken. Reality was broken. And Sarah was driving into the middle of it because she still cared enough to worry about him even after everything he'd put her through. He had to fix this. Before she arrived. Before whatever was hunting him through time decided to take someone else too. Ethan picked up the camera again. His hands were steadier now, his mind clearer. If the camera could show the past and was starting to show the future, then maybe he could use it to see what happened next. To prepare. To find a weakness in the figure or a way to close the doorway or something. Anything that would give him an advantage. He walked to his window and pointed the camera at his own reflection. He took a photo and uploaded it immediately. The timestamp showed 10 minutes in the future. The image showed him standing at the window, but he was different. Older. Lines on his face that hadn't been there before. Gray in his hair. And behind him, the apartment was changed. The walls were covered in photographs. Thousands of them. All showing the same thing from different angles and different times. The figure. Approaching. Getting closer. Frame by frame by frame. In the photo, future Ethan was holding the camera too. But he wasn't photographing the window. He was photographing the door to his apartment. And the door was open. And standing in the doorway was the figure, finally complete, finally solid, finally here. Ethan lowered the camera, his heart pounding. 10 minutes. He had 10 minutes before that future became the present. 10 minutes to figure out what Thomas Crow had missed. 10 minutes to survive what dozens of other photographers hadn't. He ran to his desk and pulled up every photo he'd taken since buying the camera. He arranged them chronologically on his laptop screen, creating a timeline. The progression was clear. Each photo showed the figure moving forward through time, getting closer to the present moment. But there were gaps. Moments where the figure disappeared from the images entirely, only to reappear further ahead. What was happening during those gaps? Ethan grabbed a notepad and started mapping it out. The figure appeared first at 3:47 p.m. yesterday, disappeared at 4:12 p.m., reappeared at 6:33 p.m., disappeared at 7:01 p.m. The pattern repeated. Roughly 25 minutes visible, roughly 2 hours invisible. He checked the current time.
9:43 morgens.
According to the pattern, the figure should be invisible right now. So why could he feel it watching him? Why did the apartment feel wrong? Unless the pattern had changed. Unless by photographing the future, he'd altered something. Accelerated something. A knock at his door made him jump. Sarah. Already? He checked the time again. She couldn't be here yet. He'd only talked to her 5 minutes ago. She'd said 20 minutes. The knock came again. Harder. More insistent. Ethan grabbed the camera and crept to the door. He looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but he could hear breathing on the other side of the door. Slow. Steady. Wrong. He took a step back. The doorknob began to turn even though he'd locked it. Even though he'd thrown the deadbolt. The metal groaned, twisting against itself. The door began to open. Ethan raised the camera and took a photo. The flash went off like a grenade. White light filled the hallway, and for just a moment he saw it clearly. The figure. Not in a reflection or a photograph, but right there in front of him. Tall and thin and made of absence. A hole in reality shaped like a person. The light faded. The figure was gone. The door was closed again, intact, locked. But Ethan knew it had been real. The camera had forced it to become visible, and visibility had driven it back. Light. The figure couldn't exist in bright light. That's why it only appeared in shadows and reflections. That's why the flash had dispersed it. Ethan ran through his apartment, turning on every light. Lamps, overhead fixtures, even the harsh fluorescent in the bathroom. He opened the curtains, letting in the morning sun. The apartment blazed with illumination. The shadows retreated to the corners, and the sense of being watched diminished. But he knew it was temporary. Night would come eventually, and the figure was patient. It had been patient with Thomas Crow. with all the others who'd bought the camera. It would wait. His phone rang again. Sarah. He answered. I'm outside your building, she said. The door downstairs won't buzz open. Don't come up, please. Just go home. Ethan. I'm not leaving you like this. I'm coming up whether you let me in or not. He heard a crash through the phone. She'd forced the door. She was in the building, coming up the stairs, walking toward danger she couldn't understand. Sarah, listen to me very carefully. When you get to my door, don't come in. Just talk to me through it. Okay? Why? What's going on? Just promise me. Fine. I promise. He waited, listening to her footsteps on the stairs. 1 floor, 2 floors, 3. Then she was outside his door, knocking gently. Ethan? I'm here. He pressed his face against the door. There's something in my apartment. Something that came through the camera. It's trying to get me, and I don't want it to get you too. Ethan, there's nothing in your apartment. You're having an episode. Let me help you. I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds, but I'm not crazy. Then show me. Open the door and show me what you're seeing. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to open the door. But Sarah had driven across the city because she was worried about him. She deserved more than shouted explanations through a locked door. Ethan turned the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. Sarah stood in the hallway, her face tight with concern. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back. No makeup. She looked exactly like he remembered her looking on Good Mornings before everything fell apart. Can I come in? She asked gently. He nodded and stepped aside. She entered slowly, looking around the apartment. He watched her take in the mess. The photos covering every surface. The lights all blazing. The camera on his desk. Ethan, she said softly. This isn't healthy. I know how it looks, but the camera is real. Here. He grabbed it and handed it to her. Take a photo of me. Any photo. Then look at the image. She took the camera hesitantly, like it might bite. She raised it and pressed the shutter. The click echoed in the bright apartment. She looked at the display screen. Her face went pale. This can't be. She looked at Ethan, then back at the camera. The timestamp says this photo was taken 10 minutes ago. But I just took it now. It shows the past. 10 minutes in the past. Every photo. Sarah took another picture. This time of the window. She checked the display, and Ethan watched her expression shift from disbelief to fear to something harder. Acceptance. There's something in the reflection, she whispered. In the window glass. Something dark. That's what's been following me. Came through the photos. Thomas Crow, the photographer who owned this camera before me, he opened a doorway somehow. And this thing has been using the camera to cross from wherever it comes from into our world. Sarah lowered the camera carefully. We need to destroy it. Right now. Before anything else happens. I tried. I can't. Every time I think about smashing it or burning it, my hands freeze. Like the camera won't let me. Then we leave. We get in my car and we drive and we don't stop until we're 1,000 miles away from this thing. It won't matter. It's connected to me now. It'll follow. Then what do we do? Ethan looked at his laptop, at the photos arranged across the screen. At Thomas Crow standing in this apartment 2 years ago. At the doorway the figure had come through. At all the other photographers who'd bought the camera and disappeared. We close the door, he said. We find the moment when it first opened and we close it. That's what Thomas Crow was trying to do. I can see it in the photos. He wasn't running. He was fighting back. How? The camera shows the past. But it's also starting to show the future. Which means time isn't linear anymore. Not for this thing. It exists in all moments at once. So if I can photograph the moment when the doorway opened, maybe I can be there too. Maybe I can stop it from ever crossing through. Sarah stared at him. That's insane. Everything about this is insane. But it's the only option I have. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. Tell me what you need me to do. Keep taking photos. Every 10 minutes. Build a timeline going backward. Find the first moment the figure appeared. That's when the doorway opened. That's when we can close it. They worked together, Sarah operating the camera while Ethan arranged the images on his laptop. They photographed the apartment from every angle, building a reverse chronology. The figure appeared and disappeared, moving backward through time in the images, getting smaller, more distant, until finally, in a photo timestamped at 3:47 p.m. the previous day, they saw it. The doorway. It wasn't in Ethan's apartment. It was in the antique store, Holloway's Curiosities. The photo showed the interior of the shop, the shelves packed with objects, the stuffed crow watching from its perch. And in the back, beyond the counter where the old man had stood, there was a door Ethan hadn't noticed before. An ordinary door with a brass handle. Except it was open, and through the opening he could see darkness. The same darkness that made up the figure. The same absence of light and space and reality. The old man stood beside the door, smiling his too wide smile. And he was holding the camera. Thomas Crow's camera. The camera that was now in Sarah's hands. He opens the door, Ethan said. Every time. He opens it and he sells the camera to someone who'll use it. Someone who'll photograph the past and let the figure through. He's feeding it. Feeding it photographers. Feeding it time itself. Then we stop him, Sarah said. We go back to that moment and we stop him from opening the door. The store doesn't exist anymore. I checked. It's gone. In the present it's gone. But in the past. Sarah held up the camera. In the past it's still there. And this thing can take us there. Ethan understood. The camera didn't just photograph the past. It was a bridge to it. That's how the figure had been crossing over. And if it could cross one direction, maybe they could cross the other. We'd be trapped, he said. If we go back and can't get out, we'd be stuck in the past forever. Then we make sure we get out. But we have to try. Because if we don't, that thing is going to keep coming. And it's going to take you like it took all the others. She was right. Ethan knew she was right. There was no running from this. No hiding. The only way out was through. He took the camera from Sarah's hands. He pulled up the photo of Holloway's Curiosities on his laptop, the one showing the open door and the old man's smile. He studied every detail. The way the shadows fell. The angle of the light. The precise moment in time when everything had gone wrong. If we do this, he said, we need rules. We stay together. We don't touch anything we don't have to. We close the door, and then we get back to the present immediately. Agreed. Agreed. Ethan raised the camera and pointed it at the laptop screen, at the image of the antique store. He pressed the shutter. The click sounded different this time. Deeper. Resonant. Like something heavy falling into dark water. The photo appeared on the display. But it wasn't showing the laptop screen. It was showing the antique store itself. In full color. In full detail. As if the camera had photographed not the image but the place. The moment. The when. Ethan reached out and touched the display screen. His finger went through. The glass like it was water. He pulled back, startled. It's a doorway, Sarah whispered. Just like the other one. We have to go through, Ethan said. Together. On 3. He took Sarah's hand. She squeezed his fingers tight. They'd been married once. Had promised to face everything together. They'd broken that promise when he'd come back from Aleppo changed and broken. But now, standing in his blazing apartment with an impossible camera in his hands, they were keeping it again. 1, he said. The air grew cold. The lights flickered. 2. The figure appeared in the corner of the room, manifesting from shadow. It was solid now, fully present. And it was moving toward them. 3. Ethan and Sarah pressed their hands against the camera's display screen. The glass dissolved. They fell forward into the image, into the past, into Holloway's Curiosities at 3:47 p.m. the previous day. The transition was like being pulled through thick fabric. Resistance and pressure and then sudden release. They tumbled onto a hardwood floor that smelled of dust and old wood. Ethan rolled to his feet, pulling Sarah up beside him. They were in the antique store. The shelves towered around them, packed with objects that seemed to whisper and shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The stuffed crow was exactly where he remembered it, glass eyes gleaming. And behind the counter, the old man stood watching them with an expression of mild surprise. "Well," he said, "this is unexpected. People usually only travel one direction through the camera." Ethan raised the camera, he still had it, had brought it through somehow, and pointed it at the old man. "Who are you? What are you?" "I'm a merchant," the old man said pleasantly. "I sell things to people who need them, or think they do. You sell cameras that trap people, that let things through from the other side. I sell opportunities. What people do with them is their choice." Sarah moved toward the back of the store, toward the door Ethan had seen in the photo. The brass handle gleamed in the dim light. The door was closed now, but he could hear something on the other side. A sound like wind or breathing or both. "Don't open that," the old man said sharply. "What's behind it?" Sarah demanded. "Nothing you want to meet. That door is closed for a reason. You opened it yesterday. In my timeline, you let something through." The old man's smile faded. "I open it when I need to, when the inventory requires replenishment. The camera is just one of many items that need to be charged, shall we say. Energized by contact with the other side." "Charged with what?" Ethan asked. "With time that doesn't flow properly. With moments that never happened and always will. With the attention of things that exist in the spaces between seconds." The old man leaned forward on his counter. "You shouldn't have come here. You should have let it take you like the others. It would have been quicker." "We're closing the door," Ethan said. "Permanently. You can't. It's already open in your present. Has been since you took your first photo. Coming back here doesn't change that. Then we stop you from opening it in the first place." The old man laughed. It sounded like wind through a crypt. "You can't kill me. I'm not alive in the way you understand it. And you can't destroy the door. It's been here longer than your city. Longer than your civilization. I just found it and learned how to use it." Sarah had reached the door. She placed her hand on the brass handle. "What if I open it? What if I let everything through at once? Then you doom this world and yourself along with it. That door holds back things your mind can't comprehend. Open it fully and they'll pour through. They'll consume every moment of time, past and future, until nothing remains but the empty space between seconds." "But if it's already open in our present," Sarah said, "then the damage is already done. We're just moving it to a different when." The old man's expression flickered. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I think I do," Sarah said. "Time isn't linear for this place. You said so yourself. The door exists in all moments. So if we open it here, now, in the past, then it's been open the whole time. Which means our present changes. The figure that's chasing Ethan won't exist because it's already escaped. The timeline resets. Or," the old man said, "you open it and every moment collapses at once. Including this one. Including you." Ethan understood what Sarah was suggesting. It was brilliant and completely insane. If time wasn't linear in this place, then cause and effect didn't work normally. Opening the door in the past might not create a timeline where the door had always been open. It might just destroy everything. But they were out of options. "Do it," Ethan said to Sarah. "Wait." The old man moved faster than should have been possible. He was around the counter and, crossing the store in 3 strides, his hand reaching for Sarah's. "You'll kill us all." Sarah turned the handle and pulled. The door swung open. Beyond it was darkness. But not empty darkness. This was darkness full of things. Full of shapes and sounds and presences that hurt to perceive. Ethan could feel his sanity fraying at the edges just from looking at it. And then the things came through. They poured out of the doorway like smoke, like water, like living shadows. They had no definite form. They were tall and short and vast and tiny all at once. They moved through the air and the walls and the floor. And everywhere they touched, reality seemed to thin. The old man screamed. It was a sound of pure terror and rage. He reached for the door, trying to close it, but the things were already wrapping around him, pulling him toward the doorway, pulling him through. "Help me!" he shrieked. But there was no help to give. The things dragged him into the darkness, and he vanished with a final echoing cry. Ethan grabbed Sarah's hand. "We have to go. Now." But the camera was gone. He dropped it when the things started coming through, and now it lay on the floor near the doorway, surrounded by writhing shadows. He'd need it to get back to their present. Without it, they'd be trapped in this collapsing moment forever. He ran for the camera. A shape lunged at him, something with too many limbs and no face. He dodged, his knee screaming in protest. He grabbed the camera and rolled, coming up beside Sarah. "Take a photo," she shouted. "Take us back." Ethan raised the camera and pressed the shutter. But nothing happened. The display was blank. The battery was dead, or the camera was broken, or something was preventing it from working. The things were getting closer, their shadow forms reaching out with appendages that hurt to look at. "It's not working," Ethan yelled. Sarah grabbed the camera from him. She opened the battery compartment and pulled out the memory card. "We don't need the camera. We just need this. The photos are what matters. The moments captured." She was right. The camera was just a tool. The real power was in the images themselves, in the frozen moments of time that existed on the memory card. But how did they access those moments without the camera? Sarah seemed to understand his thought. She held the memory card up and threw it toward the doorway. Not into the darkness beyond, but at the door itself. The card hit the wooden surface and stuck there, held by something Ethan couldn't see. The door began to change. Images flickered across its surface. All the photos they'd taken, all the moments captured, all the slices of time frozen and preserved. And then one image grew larger than the rest. Ethan's apartment. This morning. Before they'd come through. Their present. "That's our way back." Sarah grabbed Ethan's hand and they ran for the door. The things tried to stop them, their forms wrapping around their legs and arms, trying to drag them down. But Sarah and Ethan fought through them, pushing forward with desperation fueling their movements. They hit the door together and fell through. The sensation was different this time. Sharper, painful, like being pulled through broken glass. Ethan felt pieces of himself scattering, moments of his life peeling away, memories dissolving. He held tight to Sarah's hand and to the one thought that mattered: home, present, now. They crashed onto the floor of Ethan's apartment. The lights were still blazing. The laptop was still on his desk. The morning sun still streamed through the window. They'd made it back. Ethan pushed himself up, gasping. His knee throbbed. His head pounded. But he was alive. They were alive. Sarah lay beside him, breathing hard. Did it work? Did we change anything? Ethan looked around the apartment. The photos were still there, covering every surface. But as he watched, they began to change. The images of the figure were fading, becoming less distinct. In some photos, the figure was gone entirely. In others, it was just a blur, a shadow, nothing more. "It worked," he said. "We opened the door fully in the past. Everything that was trapped on the other side escaped, including whatever was hunting me. It's gone. All of it." "What about the old man?" "Gone too. Taken by the things he was trying to control." Sarah sat up, wincing. "So it's over? We're safe." Ethan wanted to say yes, but he'd learned not to trust easy answers. He went to his laptop and checked the photos again. Most of them were normal now. Just images of his apartment, of the street, of ordinary moments captured and frozen. But one photo was different. The last one they'd taken before going through the camera. It showed Holloway's Curiosities. But the store looked different. Older. More decayed. And standing behind the counter where the old man had been was someone else. A woman. Tall and thin with silver hair and eyes that looked ancient. She was smiling at the camera. And in her hands she held another camera. A different model. A different brand. But unmistakably similar in purpose. "It's not over," Ethan said quietly. Sarah looked at the image. Her face went pale. "There are more of them. More merchants. More cameras." The old man said the door had been there longer than civilization, that he'd just found it and learned to use it. which means when he was taken, someone else moved in. Someone else took over. We have to destroy this camera. Make sure no one else can use it. Ethan nodded. He grabbed the camera. It was working again now, battery charged, display clear, and carried it to his kitchen. He set it on the counter and grabbed a hammer from his toolbox. This time, his hands didn't freeze. This time, the camera didn't stop him. He brought the hammer down. Once, twice, 3 times. The camera shattered into pieces. Glass and plastic and circuitry scattered across the counter. He kept hitting it until there was nothing left but fragments. "It's done," he said. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The camera was destroyed. The doorway in Holloway's Curiosities was closed or gone or both. The figure that had been hunting him was dispersed across all of time. But the pattern would continue. Another merchant. Another camera. Another photographer who would buy it and use it and open doors that should stay closed. Sarah came up beside him and took his hand. "We stopped it for now. That's enough." "Is it?" "It has to be. We can't fight every battle. We can't close every door. We did what we could." Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. She'd driven across the city because she was worried about him. She'd believed him when no one else would. She'd walked into the past with him and fought things that shouldn't exist. She'd saved his life in more ways than one. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. Even after I gave you every reason to." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I never gave up on you, Ethan. I just didn't know how to reach you. But maybe now." She let the sentence trail off, but he understood. Maybe now they could start again. Maybe now they could rebuild what they'd lost. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it, his stomach clenching with familiar dread. The message was a single sentence. "Holloway sends his regards." Attached was a photo. It showed Ethan and Sarah standing in his kitchen. Right now. This moment. But the timestamp on the photo was 10 minutes in the future. Ethan dropped the phone. The pieces of the destroyed camera on the counter began to move, pulling back together, reassembling themselves like a reversed video. Glass fused, plastic reformed. Within seconds, the camera was whole again, pristine, undamaged, and it was warm, that same unnatural warmth Ethan had felt before. "No," Sarah whispered. The camera's display flickered to life. An image appeared on the screen. The antique store, but different now, brighter, more inviting. And behind the counter, the silver-haired woman stood smiling. Next to her was a new item, a vintage Polaroid camera, ready to be sold to the next photographer who walked through the door. Ethan understood. The camera wasn't just a device. It was a cycle. Destroy one and another took its place. Escape one merchant and another emerged. The door between moments would always be there. And there would always be someone willing to open it for the right price. "We can't win," he said. "Then we survive," Sarah replied. "We keep the camera. We don't use it. We don't let anyone else use it. We lock it away and we survive." It wasn't victory, but it was something. Ethan picked up the reassembled camera carefully. Felt heavier now, like it was full of all the moments it had captured and all the moments it would capture if given the chance. He went to his closet and pulled out a metal box, the kind used for important documents in case of fire. He placed the camera inside and locked it. Then he took the key and threw it out the window into the street below. "There," he said. "It's locked away. No one can use it now." But even as he said it, he knew the camera would find a way. Objects like this always did. They found people who needed them. People who were desperate or curious or broken enough to use them despite the warnings. Still, for now it was contained. For now they were safe. Sarah moved to leave, then paused at the door. "What are you going to do now? After all this?" Ethan looked around his apartment. At the fading photos. At the morning light streaming through the window. At the world that had almost unraveled but hadn't. "Not yet. I'm going to live," he said. "Really live. No more hiding. No more running from what happened in Aleppo. No more drowning in guilt. Marcus wouldn't want that. And I don't want it anymore either." Sarah smiled. It was a real smile this time. Warm. Genuine. Good. That's good, Ethan. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Ethan stood in his apartment alone. But for the first time in 3 months, he didn't feel alone. He felt present. Connected to the moment he was living in rather than trapped in moments that had passed or might never come. He went to his desk and opened his laptop. He pulled up his email and typed a message to his editor. He was ready to work again. Real work. Important work. He was ready to show the world what it needed to see. And as he typed, he didn't notice the small crack appearing in the metal box in his closet. Didn't hear the faint click of a camera shutter. Didn't see the new photo appearing on the reassembled camera's display screen. A photo showing his apartment. 10 minutes in the future, with Ethan at his desk. And behind him, in the reflection on his television screen, a new figure. Smaller than the last. More distinct. Wearing a silver coat. And smiling. The camera had survived being destroyed before. It would survive being locked away now. Because cameras like this weren't just objects. They were promises. Promises that you could see what others couldn't. Know what others didn't. Control what others feared. And there would always be someone willing to accept that promise. To take that camera. To open that door. The cycle would continue. But for now, on this bright morning in his messy apartment, Ethan Cole typed his email and drank his coffee and lived in the present moment. Unaware that the past was still reaching for him. Unaware that the future was already written in photographs not yet taken. The camera waited in its locked box. Patient. Eternal. Ready for the next moment when someone would need it badly enough to ignore every warning. Ready for the next door to open. Ready for the next photographer to look through its lens and see not reality, but time itself. And in an antique store that existed in all moments and none, the silver-haired woman placed another camera on her shelf. This one was digital, modern, sleek, perfect for someone who needed to capture not just images but truth. She smiled and waited for her next customer. They always came. Eventually, everyone wanted to see what they'd missed. Everyone wanted to photograph the moments that slipped away. Everyone wanted to believe they could control time. And she was happy to sell them that belief. For a price. For $300 and a warning they wouldn't understand until it was too late. The bell above her door chimed. Someone was coming in. And the cycle began again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to The Real Conflict Zone for more mysterious and mind-bending tales that'll keep you up at night. Write down your suggestions in the comment box below. What kind of stories do you want to hear next? Ghost stories? Time paradoxes? Haunted objects? Let me know, and I'll bring them to life. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some cameras capture more than just light. They capture what should have stayed hidden. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story. Bye.